Good evening and welcome to the second episode of the Conquerall Mills Music Show on 88.7 Cove FM, recorded live off the floor at Conquerall Music. I am your host, Stefan Ramey, and tonight we have Marc Montanchez in the studio playing for us. I mentioned at the end of last week's show that our act tonight would actually be the band Aphasia from Halifax. Unfortunately, due to scheduling issues, they were unable to make it down at this time, but don't worry because I will try to book them for a later episode. Now, let's cut to the record floor for our featured performer tonight, Mr. Marc Montanchez. Good evening to my studio audience and listeners at home. Welcome to the Conquerall Mills Music Show. Tonight, I am pleased to be featuring the music of Marc Montanchez, and I'd like to welcome Marc to the studio. How are you this evening, Marc?
I'm very well, thank you very much.
So it's very interesting reading over your biography because I do my homework, and reading over your biography, it seems like you've had a very long and interesting career in music. So as we go through the evening, we'll talk about some of those experiences and whatnot. Just off the top, just a couple little notes here. You've been playing since the late 80s, is that correct?
Playing, I guess, in a more or less live, semi-professional / professional context. Yeah, that's right.
And so it said when I was reading through your bio, so playing since the late 80s, and it says that you left high school to play with someone called, and this is someone I've never heard of before, Sweet Daddy Siki.
That's correct.
And can you tell us a little bit about that? That's an intriguing name.
How much time do we have? Well, Sweet Daddy was actually a very well-known wrestler in the probably from the late 60s up until right before wrestling became, cable TV, mega corporation thing. So he was right on the cusp there. And he retired or semi-retired from wrestling and put out a country and western album, and he had a pretty decent career, I think, based more on his fame and renown as a wrestler. This is not Olympic wrestling I'm talking, is show wrestling, touring wrestling. Anyhow, if we had a lot of time, I could tell you some of the stories he told me about his days. He started out actually as a boxer in Texas and then switched to wrestling because it was more lucrative and less damaging physically, I think.
Yes.
And in fact, so there was actually a circuit back then of wrestlers going. He even, I think, wrestled a lot in Nova Scotia in the Maritimes. Anyhow, so yeah, he put out a country and western album and switched career tracks to become a musical entertainer. And when the movie La Bamba came out, I don't know if you might remember.
Yes, about Richie Valens, yes.
Yeah, so at that time, I had just moved to Toronto, and he really fixated on the idea of switching his musical style to rock and roll, 50s rock and roll.
Okay.
And so it was him, and he had his two sons as a rhythm section. The drummer and bass player were both his sons. And I met the drummer, Reggie, through a mutual friend at the time. Shortly after I moved to Toronto, dropped out of high school, moved to Toronto to do different things from what I was doing before. And he was auditioning or looking for a guitar player that could play 50s style rock and roll. And when they learned that I spoke Spanish and that I could play and sing La Bamba, I was invited to audition, and I got the gig. Basically because his setup was that his opening band would do a 4-song intro set before introducing him. So the song La Bamba was part of the intro set.
Okay.
And that was how I got that gig.
Oh, that's definitely something different. Why don't you play us a song this evening? Because that's why we're here, is to listen to you play. And we've got a little bit of a mix this evening between some stuff that you're going to do live for us here in the studio, and then some stuff that we've got from some of your earlier projects that we'll play as well. And we'll try to mix that in as best we can. But I'm going to turn it over to you, Marc. Why don't you introduce the song, tell us a little bit about it, and give her the gears.
Okay, this is called Touch These Velvet Dunes, and it's a sort of psychedelic cowboy-inspired kind of song. This will be the way I go. Ask me when I'm there. There's some days we'll freeze, I guess, waiting for some news. I'll show you my names again. Touch these velvet dunes. Put away your hope again. No one sings in tune. Town, it says, save your coins and shoes, stick to tried and true designs, or break out the truth. I'll show you my names again. Touch these velvet dunes. Put away your hopes again. No one's got perfume. Sailing cowers, I see you sail outside. Flailing to your demons, sheeted wide. And we won't ride all night. When we meet, it's alright. Lonely owners, users, deaths on time. Take your darkness, leave it when you die. And we won't ride all night. When you leave, it's alright.
That was great, Mark.
you.
Thank you. Now, after you toured around with Sweet Daddy Siki, you toured. It said that you toured across Canada and the U.S. in the '90s. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Was that with Sweet Daddy Siki, or was that part of another?
No,
project?
that was. Is my microphone on? That was subsequently after I had moved to Montreal from Toronto, and played in a couple bands, but the one that we toured across Canada one time. That band was called Megalo, and then we toured across Canada and did the West Coast, Southern, and East Coast United States, and some back and forth shows between Montreal, Boston, Cambridge, that area, Toronto, Ottawa, that sort of business.
Okay, and what sort of music did they play? What sort of music did you play with them?
I guess I would have been described as kind of like grungy, hardcore, mathcore kind of music at the time.
Okay. And now the song that you just played for us obviously doesn't fall within the grungy sort of mathcore. You're going more for a little bit of a country feel. Why did you, what, I guess, why am I trying to ask you, what prompted you to move in that direction? Do you move from genre to genre? Do you like all genres? Do you try to mix and match, or do you go with one when the mood sort of strikes you?
I don't know. It's just kind of a natural evolution of inclinations, whatever. I mean, I've always liked most of all music and probably been more drawn to guitar-focused music. There's a lot of guitar and country and blues and jazz and rock and punk rock and those kinds of things. And I've been playing guitar for a long time, since I was a kid. So when I was playing, when I was in that band, that punkish band, Megalo, and we were touring, we actually brought acoustic instruments, and we would often busk to make a little bit of extra money on the side, because things were pretty lean touring in the van. And
yes, I've been with bands on the road, and it can be a little bit Spartan in terms of, maybe not eating at regular intervals, sleeping at regular intervals. You're pretty much pounding back the coffee and hoping you get from point A to point B.
Yeah. So it's always been a part of my musical indulgence, I guess, to do various things depending on whatever's going on. And
helps keep things fresh, I guess.
Right.
Why don't you play us another song, and I'll let you introduce it for us.
Okie doke. This is actually a pretty new song called Holy Sun, See What We Have Done. And it was a song that I actually had half written and recorded with the last band I was in Montreal called Warm Wave, but it sort of morphed into a different entity.
Lights are all low, clothes smell like sweat. We point our hands and face latitude west. Our backs are wrecked from work, bosses shovel dirt. Soon our legs and feet will be done. She says she'll only sleep if no one stays. She says she'll only sleep if someone pays. Holy sun, see what we have done. We try to show the grunts, the benefits and blunts. Take an inch of water one at a time. We'll leave our motel with whatever we can sell. Pull the motorcycle out of the grass. She says she'll only sleep if no one stays. She says she'll only sleep if someone pays. Holy sun, see what we have done. we've updosed. Her laboratory's closed. The solder splashed all over even our eyes. I'll watch her fall asleep. Hope I get to keep her last migrating smile into the stars. She says she'll only sleep if no one stays. She says she'll only sleep if someone pays. Holy Sun, see what we have done.
Thank you very much for that, Mark. That was Holy Sun, See What We Have Done. And you said that was a project. We're going to have to actually cut to a commercial break shortly. So maybe as a preamble to what we'll talk about next, what is Warm Wave? How long ago were you guys a band? And sort of what did you do?
Sorry, is that a question?
That is a question.
Warm Wave was a band I played in right up until I moved from Montreal to Nova Scotia, summer of 2015. It's a band that had been together for about 3 or 4 years, and it kind of got together by accident by virtue of kind of like yourself. I had a home recording studio set up and I had invited friends to come and play music with, and it sort of organically evolved out of this combination of people that played music together. It was myself, Robin and Eben, who both played various noise music machines and synths and drones and things like this, and Rob, who played drums. And we're all like top-notch, super great musicians, and we would basically get together before we played music, and then play music for hours on end in my studio and record it. And from those recordings, which are completely improvised, where I would sort of like in my studio and editing environment sort of sculpt out little melodies and things like that would eventually turn into songs that would get re-injected back into the band. So it was like this really interesting collaborative project that I think it was one of my favorite bands that I've ever been in.
And we do have a couple of pre-recorded tracks from that band, which we'll get to probably in a little bit. But right now we have to cut to commercial. So we're going to come back in a little bit and continue talking with Marc Montanchez on the Conquerall Mills Music Show. And we're back to the Conquerall Mills Music Show, where we're speaking with Marc Montanchez. But let's have a listen to Pyongyang Suntan. that was Pyongyang Sungtan by Marc Montanchez, his former band Warm Wave, off the EP of the same name, Pyongyang Suntan. And listening back to that track, there's definitely a lot of interesting sounds happening, and I sort of want to know more about the production of that song and what you played and did for that song.
Right. So as I said, when we would, because we were jamming, improvising in a full-on recording studio, whenever we would get together, we'd have, everything was mic'd up, and I would just click record on the computer and go into the room, and we would play for hours. And then I would come back and sort of dissect things that I thought sounded good or had some sort of melodic or structural potential. So that piece came out of just a section of one of these long improvised pieces. And I, just for the heck of it, reversed it. So that's why you hear this sort of backwards guitar and drum groove there. And then just overdubbed a couple of acoustic guitar things and some other, I asked Robin or two of the other people to add some electronic synthesizer textures and things like this, and it just sort of became in fact, more of a studio produced song exercise rather than a performed song.
And for the mixing and editing of that, would you have been working within the digital domain using software and computer hardware, or would you have been actually editing or using any analog equipment to record that?
Well, all the actual editing and recording and playback was digital, but most of the effects were external, I guess you would say.
Oh, okay. Outboard gear, essentially.
Yeah, like a mixer and machines with knobs and whatnot. Yeah.
Well, I'd say what we should do is maybe pull it back. Let's hear something maybe live off the floor if you want to tell us what you're going to be playing for us.
Okay. I actually don't like the title of the song I had, so I gave you a set list. Was there one that was called like Poster Religions or something like that?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a working title of this song. And in fact, I'm not even sure if it'll make it to the final cut.
Okay.
So it's called Poster Religions, and it's a work in progress.
Coming around centuries run, had a lot of booze. Sleep at the wheel, fortunate runs. I had a lot to do. Come on the heels of all that we've done. Got a lot of news. Come on the heels of Hound Head luck. Had a lot of booze. I'm on a separate ways. Sleeping in college ways. I'm on a separate ways. Out of my mind, it's okay. Now that we're here, let's sign up a storm. Figure out the crew. Who's the decider, who's the undone? Take a straw or two. King of the mountain shoots them all down. Make them sing the blues. We're the boss of new religions. We have a lot to do. I'm on a separate ways. Sleeping in college ways. I'm on a separate plane. Out of my mind, it's okay.
Thank you very much, Mark. Obviously, this is a more recent song because you said the title is a working title. When it comes to writing music for you, does it generally take you a long time to write songs, a short time to write songs? Do you have a bunch of songs woodshedded, or do you only write when sort of the inspiration strikes?
All of the above.
So I guess in the phase of writing this, sort of, how did this song come about?
Well, for example, this song actually was a sort of a thing I had written maybe 8 or 9 years ago originally, and I'd spent a lot of time in my little studio setup sort of multi-tracking on my own, doing little layered guitar and bass and tambourine type things, and this is what came out of that. And I sort of, since I've been sort of trying to adapt myself to playing without a band and just playing songs on my own unaccompanied, which is a completely new endeavor for me. I've been going through my catalog, I guess, or collection of songs I've written and trying to see which ones fit into this sort of context. And this one I thought might work, and I'm still working on adapting it into this, naked format. So I'm just trying to shape it and hope that it comes across with some sort of emotional meaning somehow.
And would some of these selections that you're playing tonight, are you planning to actually release an album or an EP of solo stuff, or are these sort of more one-off pieces that you're doing?
I haven't really figured it out that far.
Not that far along. You still got working titles and whatnot. So
yeah, I mean, eventually, I think I would like to hone down this solo performing thing to the point where I can feel comfortable to record it and put it out there. So I think it's not a specifically set target thing, but I think if things evolve, it probably will happen.
excellent. Well, I think we're about the time where we're going to cut to our last commercial break. You are listening to Marc Montanchez here at Conquerall Music on the Conquerall Mills Music Show on 88.7 Cove FM. And we are back to the Conquerall Mills Music Show. Again, we have Marc Montanchez in here with us this evening. And we were talking before the break about new stuff that Marc has been working on, but obviously the Warm Wave would have been the last album EP that you would have put out before moving to Nova Scotia. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, and one of the songs, I was listening to some of these before the taping of the show, just so I had a little bit of, to come up with questions and things like that, and the one that I really, really liked was God's Bad Poems. Can you tell me a little bit about that song?
Well, that one pretty much straight up created itself, again, out of one of these improvised sessions. It has, I think, 2 or maybe even 3 sort of sections, and don't know really much what to say about it. It's kind of created. That was what I really enjoyed about playing in that particular band, was a lot of the music we made created itself spontaneously, even to the point of the words that I would sing. I had a mic set up and I would just kind of sing along while all this swirling sound and stuff was going on.
Yes.
And I'm not sure, but I believe that one has a little bit of pedal steel, which I also played in that combo in it. So yeah, it was a pretty much collaboratively created, improvised song that was made out of the magic of people making music together.
This is called God's Bad Poems from the Warm Wave EP, Pyongyang Suntan.
beach. Is this heaven or the pearly gates? Oh, it's neither. Still smell hate. I'm leaving by car the whole 5 miles. The burned out hopes, small bright sky.
That was God's Bad Poems by Marc Montanchez from the Warm Wave EP titled Pyongyang Suntan. I really like the way that starts with the bluegrass and sort of the gospel sound to it, and then it cuts into that louder section towards the end. Can you tell us a little bit about this song?
Gosh. Well, what could I say about the song? I guess it's the interesting aspects of it, as you mentioned, this sort of dynamic curve. You know, it has this sort of softish, harmonious beginning, and then basically a rock out section that kind of focuses on the drums and swirling synthesizer sounds around a groove. I guess that's how if I was a music critic, that's how I would describe it. I don't know.
And Warm Wave isn't the only band. Well, obviously you've been in multiple bands over the years, but another band worth mentioning, and you're actually going to play us a track from this album live, and then we've also got the recorded track to play with it, so we may as well pair these up and put these back to back. So the project you had started with, or not started with, but one of the projects you worked on was with the Hazels. Am I saying that right?
The Hazels.
The Hazels.
Yeah.
Hazels. Tell us a little bit about the Hazels.
Well, that was a sort of a garage rock band that I had with a couple of buddies, and so that was a sort of loud band that I played in, more kind of standard song format, 2-3 minute sort of pop-ish songs, but with a lot of fuzz boxes and loud drumming, and played with a couple friends who I'd known for some years before we played music together. I guess John Milcham, who is Glenn Milcham's brother from Blue Rodeo, and he actually was a guitar player. They had an amazing band together, he and his brother, called Starvin' Hungry, who played a long time, and he kind of did the whole touring and playing and putting out records thing with that band, and then wanted to give a break and said, I'm just going to play drums, don't ask me anything about music or decisions, I'm going to play drums. So he was the drummer in that band. And on bass, we originally had Val Sitaru, who played in a whole pile of really cool garage bands in Montreal. And then he got swamped from having 2 young kids. And we then, on bass, after he left, was Norm Dion, a good friend of mine, who's actually pretty well known and very amazing musician in his own right, as a kind of country and folk singer of original music in Montreal. And so, yeah, we all kind of came from these sort of different backgrounds and did this completely insanely loud fuzz rock project. But I think the song you're going to play is called You Were Heavy and Gone. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Right. So I think the demo you have is actually one of the sort of early home demos I made, and the version of the song that the band played was a little bit different. And I'm going to actually perform this song afterwards, which is also different. And I guess the common thread in this song is it was like I think it might be noticeable, like a thing that I'm really into that sort of informs a lot of the music that I do is music that has a strong drone element.
Yes.
And that's a feature in a lot of music that I like. When you were asking me before about like all these different types of music that I like, the sort of drone as a counterpoint to melody is common in Indian classical music, Appalachian folk music, Spanish flamenco, native drumming, Gregorian chant.
Getting into the world music sort of stuff, right?
I think world music is a weird sort of like record industry classification. I think that it's just an element, a style of music making where you have a strong, dominant kind of like tone occurring with things counterplaying off it. And I think it's always something that I've really felt easily immersed in and kind of lose myself in that style of music. And this particular song, I think, came out indirectly out of one of my favorite records that I have is by John Lee Hooker. John Lee Hooker sings the blues, and it's sort of like a specialty label blues, obscure blues record that John Lee Hooker, probably a compilation of singles that he had put out in the 50s and 60s, and it's got all his well-known songs like Boogie Chillin' and In the Mood for Love, King Bee, all those kind of tunes. But he has this particular style of playing where his guitar is tuned, so he has a lot of open strings that he just kind of like plays, strums along with, and does basic little chordal things and noodles around. But so this song, I think, was informed by that influence of John Lee Hooker.
So what we'll get you to do is, I'd like to hear you play it for us, and then I'm just going to stack it right with the recorded version after you play it for us.
Okay, here goes.
so high. Silver feelings are razor sharp. I'm down, way down so high. Carried out of sharp and drony eyes, way down so high. Turn over my rock, inspirational fire, way down so high. 100 words of sympathy, drone on so high. Worry about missing you, but not a lot, way down, alright. I'm not the metal horse rider you ran me for. Slow down, way down, alright. Take your local heartache to the land of tomorrow. Way down, alright. Give you 50 push-ups, a mountain of rhymes. Way down so high. Tender your demotion, you feel the side. Way down so right.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mark. And what we're going to do now is play the studio recording you have from that project. This is Heavy and Gone by the Hazels.
I'm down, way down, so high.
And that was Heavy and Gone by this evening's performer, Marc Montanchez, his former band, the Hazels. I wanted to say thank you to Marc for coming out and sharing your music and your stories with us. And I also wanted to thank Sam Fancy, who's one of our audience members this evening, for helping me get the driveway cleared out. So when audience members or performers arrived, they had a place to park and get in and out of the building safely. I am your host, Stephen Ramey, and you're listening to the Conquerall Mills Music Show. Well, folks, that is our show for the evening. Thanks for tuning in. If you would like to be featured on my show, or you would like to participate in the studio audience, please email stephen@conquerallmusicstore.ca or call 902-530-3730. If you've missed an episode, you can also check out our YouTube channel at Conquerall Music to hear previous broadcasts. The Conquerall Mills Music Show is hosted, produced, and mixed by Stephen Ramey and recorded at Conquerall Music. Our engineer in the control room tonight was Adam Fancy. Next week, our featured performer will be Andrew Muse. Until then, have a great evening. You are listening to the Conquerall Mills Music Show on 88.7 CKVE Cove FM and online at www.covefm.com. Keep your radio tuned to 88.7 for Time Machine with Bob McDonald at 9 o'clock. Have a good evening.